Howdy, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to Semantics. It's great to be back. Uh, yeah, today I've got with me the ever illustrious Michael Chan. Michael, how's it going? Semantics?
It's going good, going good. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. I got back from a lake trip this weekend, much needed, tons of fun. Um, but now I'm back and I'm ready to do some accessibility stuff with you today. And before we dive into it, would you introduce yourself for anyone who might not know who you are?
Yes, yes, yes. So I am Michael Chan. I go by Chantastic about the internet. Chantastic most places I care to be, except for here on Twitch. Unfortunately, someone's squatting on Chantastic, so that's kind of like a bummer.
Hmm.
However, I think that it might have just been me when I made like a Justin.tv account, like or whatever,
Oh,
Justin Live or whatever, Justin TV, whatever it was, back in the day. And like I just don't have access to whatever email address it was. So
you're
I
your
might
own squatter.
I might Ben, I gotta tell you something. I have such a bad domain acquisition problem that like this is how you know it's bad. When you have like that idea and you're like, I'm gonna go buy that domain,
Hmm.
and then you go to register it and you're like, oh, it's taken, bummer. And you look at the who is data and it's you.
Has this happened multiple times?
It has happened more than once.
That's amazing and also horrific.
At least I'm consistent though, right? Like that's the
Yeah. Let's see. I'm sitting on just a few domains, but I'm trying to like actually like when I create the domain like immediately funnel it into a site. Like I did that with AliSurf. I got that domain and I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna make the project for this. Um yeah, just
that's
because
a domain, a
yeah,
strong domain.
yeah.
Strong domain.
Nobody tells Stephanie, but I have claimed 11d.party, and at some point I'm gonna use that for something. But uh, not yet, and maybe not ever. But I have it, and it's good. Um,
You have the option now. You can
yes,
do whatever you want with it.
yes. Stephanie may have 11d.rocks, and 11d may have 11d.dev, but I have 11d.party.
I think it's the most joyous of all the options, I
Of
think.
course.
So, when it lands, it's gonna land hard.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's great to have you back. We had you on previously as we were building out accessible icons in React. Uh,
That
what
was
are we?
fun.
Yeah, it was great. What are we doing today?
Okay, so today we're working on a project that you actually helped me out with, and I learned a ton from. And this was something that I needed to do at work, no less. And so I got pretty far, and I was pretty happy with it. And then I messaged my good friend Ben Myers, who runs this awesome stream talking about accessibility and semantics and stuff. And he was like, yo, that's pretty good. But there are some things that we need to talk about. And we talked about those things, and I learned a lot. And so, yeah, and there was also a lot of like Google learning that happened kind of before that in that earlier
Mm.
phase. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna hit Ben up and we're gonna build some of this on stream and we're gonna have a good time and more people can benefit from the things that I learned, the things that I learned from you. And yeah, so the piece of UI that we're covering today is actually um, as we're looking at the repo of for this project, what we're going to clone. And we're probably not going to clone all of the pieces of this because it actually there's a lot of code there to make all of the snippets work. Um, but the UI that we're going to replicate is that piece right behind, right below the project's name, where we have all of those kind of like tab like things. And so I called this main nav, and but I don't know. There's like a bunch of names that we could use for it. The thing I like about main nav, I don't know. I'm kind of like a nut for naming, and the thing that I really liked about main nav or main navigation or something like that is that this is the navigation that is inside of your main content. And this is really important because there's still the GitHub navigation, right? That's the navigation for the site, but like this is the navigation for this particular resource, this GitHub repo. And so yeah, so that's the thing that we're going to cover. So the navigation for this resource, I think, for someone who's watching um, either now or later, There's uh, these are often like the resources of your app, right? So for GitHub, a repo is like a resource of the app. For your app, you might have a very complex person object. And so you want to, kind of divide that object up by some, certain ways that you might edit it, or, you know, dashboard data that you might see for them. But as we have bigger objects, Airbnb has one of these. Like pretty much every site that you go to, like you'll notice there's some kind of like sub navigation. And so anyway, um, oftentimes it follows like these really big objects in your product. And so yeah, so we're gonna do the GitHub repo one because we knew that we'd be seeing it as we even just described the project. So there it is.
Yeah, and so it's we're talking about specifically this tab treatment for navigation throughout the different repository settings. And I believe we're going to dive into some of the link user experience. There's icons, and then also I think we're diving into today. This repo doesn't have it, but if I go to the lunch dev calendar, that one should have it as well, or it should have it, which would be that sometimes you get uh there's like the numbers in here, right? There's like two pull
Yes.
requests, 17 issues, stuff like that. So all of
Yep.
these things go into the kind of this navigation experience, and we're going to be, I guess, diving into all of these.
Yeah, yeah. And so if you want to follow along, or you aren't going to be able to stay the whole time, or we don't actually get as far as we want to, if you go to semantics dev slash main dash nav on GitHub, that project is ready to go. It's what we'll be working from today, and it has the full treatment for the GitHub repo navigation. So if you pull that down, it has everything that makes that look cool, including I think it even has the Octocon icons set up in it. So
Yes.
don't get all the way to the end, which it's very possible that we won't if we talk about everything in depth. You can download that and see it all in action.
Okay, so this is the finished product, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep. Yep.
cool. All right. Um, I'm super excited to get started. So what should I do to start?
Yeah. So I think do you already have this? You already have this cloned, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So what if we do this? Let's go into the editor where you have that cloned, and why don't we just start from the markup? We can kind of go in there, see what's already in there, and then we can comment it out and talk about it piece by piece.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we talked about what is it. So in the README, I have kind of a list of things that we'll cover. I can keep track of that. We kind of covered the who is it part. And then, yeah, so we need to talk a little bit about why it shouldn't be skipped. Now, this was one of my first questions, and I think the first thing that I reached out to you on is like, okay, I'm looking at all these navigations. Some of them handle them differently. Like, should this be included in the things that are skipped? Because there's a, what is it, skip to main link.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of sites will have skip links, right, which will let you if you're a keyboard navigator, you can like click a button or a link, and it'll take you further into the page, like hopping over the kinds of like super common links that you would find on every page, which you can imagine if you're a keyboard navigator, like that is clutter that you have to like
Yeah.
navigate over like every time on every page. Sometimes you just genuinely don't want to have to encounter that all the time. You want to get directly to what it is you care about. So websites will make links called skip links. They'll take you just over the navigation into the main stuff. And like your question here is like, does this navigation count as the main stuff?
Right. Yeah. So as I was going through, like looking at various examples, and I've always admired the work that GitHub has put into accessibility on their site. There's a lot of really good considerations, and so much, to the point that I, kind of modeled this after what they're doing, and I hit you up early on in the process, and I said, hey, I don't understand, like, why are they not skipping this chunk of navigation with everything else? And I think the answer that we came up with is that this is actually content, right? Like this is how you navigate content, and so it's different, for this project versus like another project, as opposed to like main navigation, like you know, you're not signed in right now, but like you have like why GitHub, team, enterprise, explore, marketplace pricing. Those are things that are like not part of the experience of you navigating this repository. And
Mhm.
those are things that you might want to skip if you're kind of like going from page to page. And to get to the navigation for this particular repo and be able to go right to actions or discussions
Mhm.
and whatnot. You wouldn't want to skip those because you know now you have to tab through the whole tab top header, which is the irrelevant stuff, and then get you know tab through the stuff that you care
Yeah.
about to get to the right repo page.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And if you think about like the common day-to-day experience of using a repo, right? Like when I go to a repository, I'm very rarely like diving directly into the files. Like sometimes I do, but more often than not, I'm probably diving into the issues or the pull requests, right? Like you you want to be able to get to this because this isn't corrupt. It's actively part of the user experience.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the first question that we need to answer is like, does this navigation get skipped? And in the examples that we pulled up, no, because you know, in you know, maybe that would change if you had a you know for like various different
Mhm.
circumstances, but in general, this is you know kind of your main navigation for this resource, and so it should be attached to the content and inside of your kind of main element container. So that's the first thing. And so if we go back to the code, we can just start with our main container. So if you want to, I guess we can copy, let's
Should
see,
we make a
body.
new?
I don't even have a main here. Look at that.
Yeah, let's. Should we make a new file? Would that be helpful to
Sure.
start?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We can do that.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'm gonna call this nav HTML, and I'm gonna spin up. We've got our boilerplate here,
Perfect.
and then you want a main tag. Okay.
Yep. Perfect. Now, the next thing is that we're going to use a nav. And now I'm not actually, I'm not an expert on this. This is something that you know better than me. But when we create a nav, this actually creates a landmark. And, you know, for a lot of us who don't daily use, you know, assistive technologies, we don't really know what landmarks are.
Hmm.
And so there's this kind of feeling of like, oh, yeah, like everything should be tabbable. But um, folks who do use assistive technologies are really powerful, like you know, power users of that technology. And there's a lot of really cool shortcuts that you can do to navigate a page by these regions. And nav is one of those like kind of landmarks that are navigable.
Hmm.
Um, now, Ben, did I get that right? Is there anything else that you think should be added to that?
Um, yeah, I think your explanation's pretty solid. I want to show because I think sometimes we talk about these things in the abstract, and I'd love to actually show that in play.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and open up VoiceOver, which is always a gamble on stream. Ask me how I know. Here we go. Let me just there we go. So I'm gonna turn on VoiceOver over on the side here and it's gonna think for a minute.
VoiceOver on system preferences.
Okay, so I've got VoiceOver active here, and what I'm
Cool.
gonna do, different screen readers have different ways to do this. So if you're using JAWS, you're gonna have like a whole bunch of key bindings, but I prefer to the way VoiceOver does it, which is it provides a user interface for this called the rotor. So in JAWS, you can open up the rotor by doing Control Option U,
Window spots menu.
and then I can use the left and right arrow keys to find different kinds of elements that I might expect on the page. So,
Accessibility features table window spot.
hang on. Let me
Accessibility features
refresh
Chrome,
this.
GitHub, Symantec staff/main window
There we
spots
go.
menu. Links menu. URL.
So, yeah, I just didn't know that I was focused on the browser right now. So
Headings menu.
here we can see, like, for instance, our headings get turned into an outline that, like, you can navigate the page based on heading level, which would be like for those of us who are sighted, it would be like skimming a page by its headings. Then
Form
there's
controls menu. No items. Tables menu. Landmarks menu.
landmarks. So you can see that we've got a few landmarks in here. There's a banner. This corresponds to the main header of the page.
Banner.
There's a global
Global
navigation.
navigation.
There's you can see
Site search.
there's site search. There's this main And then there's this repository navigation here.
Repository navigation.
So the reason the screen reader knows that we can even that these like navigation elements even exist is because we're using the nav tags. And so through our markup, or rather through GitHub's markup, GitHub is surfacing that this is a region that users might care about, and here's why: is because it's navigational. So that's the experience here that we would see.
Yeah. That's a
GitHub,
great
semantic staff / main nav, a clone of GitHub's project, voiceover off.
Sorry, we had voiceover yammering. Can you start again? I'm so sorry.
That's a great illustration. I've never actually used that feature in VoiceOver. What's the keystroke for it again?
That was Control Option U.
Control Option U. Okay,
Yes.
cool. I'm definitely going to start adding that to my my repertoire of voiceover.
Anthony in the chat is noting something I've said before, which is that disabled users by necessity become power users of their assistive technology, right? So, what I just showed you here isn't an edge case. It's not, oh, this is on the bare extremes of what some people use with their assistive tech. This is how people use assistive tech.
Yep. It's the same as us, just like as me, just like looking at it and being like, that's these are the navigation sections, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you would open up the rotor, you would see the navigation sections, and then jump to one of those navigation sections and navigate by it. Yeah, absolutely. So there is something that that's really cool that you showed off is that isn't just some empty name. It's actually named repository navigation.
Yes.
So let's take our nav and actually add that feature into it, so that it says repository navigation. Now, the way that I had done this is to use an ARIA label for that nav. And so on the nav, we just add ARIA-label, and we can put in whatever we want there. In this case, we can just call it repository navigation, like they did.
Okay.
And I'm glad that you demonstrated the what is it, the I never remember what they're called. They're not regions, they're
landmarks.
Landmarks, that's right. Glad you demonstrated the landmarks, because now we can see like what why that's important, and then also how to label it so that we can give it a discrete name, when someone's navigating, to be able to be like, okay, this is the repository navigation versus global navigation.
And here's where things get even more fun is I think by default assistive technologies actually include the word navigation for us.
Yes.
So I think we can probably just call this repository.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So in the example, we have repository in there, and it this varies, right? But my experience is kind of mirrors what you said, in that it will append navigation to that when it is read.
It's like in an image, in an image's alt text, you don't need to include image of, because the user's already told it's an image. You don't need to add that clutter. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think the next thing that we'll do is we're going to do is we're going to talk about links, because a nav can have just links inside of it. There doesn't have to be any additional markup except for just, a bunch of links that, people can, navigate around with, whether it be on the same different pages or on the same page using a framework fragment. So, okay, so we got our link, you got your link markup in there. And let's throw a couple of them in there. Let's do, I'm going to call out some links, and then you can just add them based on, GitHub. So we'll do a code link.
We probably aren't actually going to make them go anywhere for now, so I'm probably just going to give this a pound just for the sake of demo.
Yep, that's totally fine.
Okay.
And then we'll do issues next. Pull requests. And we can add discussions, just one more, just for fun.
Okie doke.
Okay, awesome. So now we have 4 links, and once you have like more than one link, you want to know which one you're on. So this was actually one of my favorite things that I found, because there's plenty of ways that you could do this, right? Like, and there's plenty of ways that I have done this in the past, right? Like, you just make some kind of class that's like class is current page or something like that. But we can actually do quite a bit better than that, because there are some ARIA uh, attributes, that we can actually tie into that actually add some semantics, to say like this is actually the current page. And so the one that we use for that is ARIA current.
And then I can see it's VS Code is helpfully giving me a few options here. So date,
Oh,
fall,
yeah.
location, page, step, time, true.
So I have to say this is probably one of my favorite things that I learned this year. I'm gonna post in a link to an article that I found extremely helpful. It's really nicely laid out and written, and it shows you kind of examples of how you would how you might use each of these options that VS Code is presenting to us. Now, I had started my first draft of this was just ARIA current true because I didn't see that that there were other options that we could do. But there's tons of options. There's a step that you can use like for stepper. There's location to show like I think it's like your location in the world. Date if it's like kind of like a date related currency. It's like super nifty. Now, the one that we'll be using is page.
Nope.
Okay, cool. So we have page. Now, I think that at this point, I want to jump into the style sheet just a little bit. Do you want to make a new style sheet, or how do you want to handle this?
Depends on how much styles. But before we dive into the styles real quick, can we just see without the styles, see what the screen?
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spin up. I've got an extension called Browser Sync that runs a web page based on runs a web page in a dev server. And I specifically want nav.html. So this is what we've got. Obviously, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's got all of our markup. And let me turn on VoiceOver and we'll see kind of what the experience is here.
VoiceOver on system preferences, Chrome, document, Google Chrome, document, web content, current page, link, code, repository, navigation, Chrome has new window.
Okay, so there were a few things going on there. Basically, because we did two things at once, we tabbed to a link, but we specifically tabbed to a link inside of our nav. So it told us that we were in repository navigation. That was kind of tacked in at the end there. But it also said link code, and it said current page. I can reproduce that if I tab forward and then tab back real quick.
Link, current page, link, code. You are currently on a link.
So we didn't need to add any like hidden text or anything to say current page. We added the ARIA current page to the link, and it did that for us automatically. Nice thing about doing it that way is it'll also get localized if the user's using like their screen reader in a different language. They'll be told it in their native language as opposed to any hints that we can provide. So that's pretty nice.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that. That's a great little touch, because you could recreate this with ARIA labels of your own, but it doesn't get kind of local.
I'm gonna open up the rotor now.
Landmarks menu.
So we can see that we have two landmarks. We use the main tag, so it's telling us that there's a main, and it's telling us repository navigation. So if this were a bigger page with a lot more going on, I could, thumb through this and I could skip directly to the repository navigation.
Main, repository navigation.
Let me kill VoiceOver and we can keep going.
VoiceOver off.
Okay, so we're kind of at a fork in the road. So and I don't know, I have a way that I kind of like doing things, and I think you kind of like doing it the same way, is that I kind of feel like maybe we should just continue chasing the right markup and then style later. How do you feel?
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so what we have next then is, it might be nice, maybe not in all cases, but in this case, I want to be able to know how many links are in the navigation. So we see that our navigation works exactly as it needs to with just the nav and the anchors. But if we want to have a number of links, we're going to have to add some additional markup. And so, Ben, you probably know which direction I'm going with this, so I'll hand it off to you. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. So like Chan has mentioned, we have a bunch of anchor tags in the nav. This is totally acceptable. There's like nothing wrong with this whatsoever. But another pattern that's frequently used inside of navs, and if you've ever written a nav, you've probably seen something like this, is you can stick inside the nav an unordered list, and then all of your links can go as list items. So I'm gonna do that real quick. There's probably a faster way to do this, but at this point, I'm just gonna.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you were a Emmet Power user, you could just do it in one line super fast.
Right. Yeah. There's probably like a sequence of 5 arcane keys. I need to do that in Vim or something like that. But yeah. So I've just created an unordered list, and every anchor tag sits inside of its own list item.
Jasper Furnace knows what's up. Emmet
Yeah.
Power user in chat.
There we
right now.
go. Yeah. So now you can see we've got inside our nav, we've got the very familiar bullet points of list items. I'm just gonna embiggen this a bit. Dan's recommending the Konami code. I'm sure they'll help. Did you know, by the way, I think it's the Konami code. If you do the Konami code inside of Discord, it opens up a disco mode, which is delightful. Thank you to Brandon Dale, who introduced that little tidbit in our server.
I feel like
Voiceover on system preferences.
try a new site, you gotta do that first.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of dive back into VoiceOver and give this another shot.
Chrome, document, web content. Document, web content. D,
Oh, where are
D.
we?
document, document.
Okay.
Current page, link, code,
just gonna
list 4
tab.
items. Chrome has new window.
Yeah, so it told us like, hey, you're in this list. There's 4 items, and as I tab through this, not only are we gonna get the link information, we're gonna be told how far into the list of links we are.
Link, issues. You are currently on a
Okay.
link. To click this link, press Control, Option, Space. Bullet, 3, link,
Oh, there we go.
bullet. You are current link. Pull request, bullet, 4, link.
What's up?
We still got the bullets in there, which is kind of like, we'll figure out with styling later.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always kind of like irritating because it'll stop on each of those as well with the
Mhm.
tabbing.
Yeah, so we added the UL treatment, and it told us how many items were in this navigation, which is excellent. Lets me know my progress in this, because maybe if the nav only has like 2 things in it, right? It's not the end of the world if I have to tab through those. If it's got like 10 things, not great.
Yeah, yeah. And then sometimes, it can provide some useful context, right? Like, knowing where it is in a thing, whether it's at the front of the list or the back of the list or the
Mhm.
middle of the list, like knowing all that kind of stuff can be helpful in kind of wayfinding.
Yes. All right, gonna kill voiceover again.
Okay, kill voiceover.
Voiceover off.
I'm going to do another thing, or we're going to do another thing that you had taught me, which is to now link the unordered list with the navigation. And this provides like another little nicety, where by tying together the list with the ID, we can effectively name the list. So when it's reading the list, it'll use the ARIA label name for the I forgot it again.
For the landmark.
Landmark. I keep wanting to call it region. Okay, so to do this, what we'll do is we'll add an ID to our nav element.
All right.
And it can be anything. We can call it, I think in the demo I have it as a repository nav or repository dash nav. You could do repository, camel case nav, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
And then in the UL, we'll use another ARIA attribute, which is ARIA labeled by,
All right.
and then use that same string. So they're tied together with strings.
So our nav is named repository thanks to the ARIA label. And
Yep.
the unordered list is pointing to the nav for its name. So it's saying whatever the nav's name is, this too will be my name.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. You taught me that. You taught me that.
Mhm.
I hope that I learned it right and I'm not teaching it incorrectly now.
We'll see. doing something like this is a little surprising to me, like pointing to another things like aria label. I don't know that that's what I necessarily taught, but that's fine. um we'll,
Maybe I learned wrong. There's there's some. I've definitely learned a thing or two wrong in my life.
it's it's possible. So the way I'm going to validate this is an alternate way that you can validate some of the accessibility stuff that you've got going on, is by peeking at the accessibility tree, which I'm in my elements tab. This should hopefully be very familiar. I'm going to go ahead and select the UL here, and then I'm going to go into, there's this little like chevron over here, this and there's just one more tab that's just hidden away, and it's called accessibility. This opens up the accessibility tree, which is the browser's like alternate version of the DOM exposed specifically to assistive technologies. Um, so this is a way you can kind of validate like what names are different elements getting and where is it getting it from. So our list here has the name repository, which it's getting from the navigation. So I'm presuming everything worked fine because we can see that it's working out that way in the accessibility tree. So this is a
Yep.
way, it won't replace screen reader testing, but I think it's a fast way to get a lot of information. Same as like when you're looking at like the CSS styles and you want to see like what are all the files that are giving me these rules and stuff like that. I find that this is a very similar validation experience.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like when you, especially for things like this, where you just want to validate that it got hooked up properly, like
Yes.
there's not like a typo in there, and you don't have to go through that whole process again. I'm
Mhm.
seeing it right here is so nice because it's like, okay, cool, it's hooked up, and then you can kind of queue up all of those big things that you want to test, all at once, knowing
Yeah.
that in fact this little piece is, effectively done as far as the browser is concerned.
Yeah. All right.
Cool, cool. So what we have so far, I'm just gonna recap real quick. We have our our nav that has an ARIA label repository. It's getting the navigation part for free. So when you kind of search by landmark, it's going to say repository navigation. It's hooked up to our unordered list via ARIA labeled by. We have that unordered list with the list items to provide a count. So it'll say like, link 3 of 4 or current page 3 of 4, and then read, pull requests. And then we have all of our links, and then we have ARIA current, which is actually providing that, you know, this is the current page. Okay, cool. So I think that we got pretty much everything that we wanted to talk about with links.
Mhm.
Then let's see. Also, unordered list. Now, I think at this point we kind of have everything that we need, and we could probably jump into styling. Do you feel
Okay.
comfortable
Let's do it.
going that direction now? Okay, cool.
Let's do it.
Cool. So let's open up a new style sheet.
I'm gonna call this nav styles.css.
Perfect.
So as
Love
not to
it.
compete with our styles CSS. And I'm just gonna go ahead and bring that in. And that's going to be, here we go. Boom.
Beautiful. You're so adept at this. This
Emmet
HTML.
shortcuts, my friend. Emmet shortcuts.
It's funny. I mean, all these skills I used to be so versed in, and then the more time I spent in frameworks, the more it was just like I don't even. I could not write a link tag to save my life right now. I don't think.
Nobody tell Ryan Florence.
Is it rel with a ref, or no? It's an href, right?
It's href to get the file, rel to tell the
Yeah.
browser what kind of thing this resource is.
Yeah, I only remembered because I literally just saw you finish it. So.
All right,
Okay, cool.
let's make some styles.
Let's make some styles. Okay, so for the first thing is we noticed like right away that we have a little bit of an irritation with our dots, right? It's going to stop on each of those dots.
Mhm.
So we want to get those out of the way. We can style these however you like. We can do them with class names. We can do them. I mean, my preferred and the way I think that it is in the project is with attribute selectors. So we could go that route,
Okay.
or just do classes if you think that would land better.
However you'd rather do it.
All right, let's use attribute selectors because attribute selectors slap hard.
They do.
Okay, so attribute selectors are sweet. Let's open up, open up some braces. That's how we write an attribute selector. And let's hide all of this under the data attribute or data prefix, I guess. and we'll call this, let me see. I gotta open up my style sheet to see kind of like what I was thinking for this. Um, I think we might go a little bit verbose on this
Okay.
and call it main nav. Um, so main dash nav dash dash list. It's kind of like a BEM-ish convention. So like list is going to be a child of like the the main nav because it has two dashes in it.
Okay.
And then yeah, so open up those curly braces.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna open these things up side by side so we can see both the styles and the markup. together.
Okay, cool, cool, perfect, perfect.
What are
Yeah,
we what are we applying this to? Is this going
that's
to the
gonna
UL?
yeah, that's gonna be on the navigation element.
Got it.
Or I'm sorry, no, you're right, the UL. You're a step ahead of me, as
well,
usual.
it said list, and so I assumed lists. There we go. Okay. Cool.
Okay, cool. So we have main nav list as our selector, and we're gonna do kind of a pretty conventional unset of the list. We're gonna do margin 0, padding 0. You might have like a better way to do this. This is pretty like common. And then list style type is none. That's gonna get rid of the bullets.
Fun
And we'll
little
just
tidbit I explored on Stephanie's stream yesterday. In Safari, doing this will cause VoiceOver to forget that your list is a list. This is intended behavior. Don't worry about it.
well, this is actually great in our case where it's not really a list. It's we just want the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we're gonna display flex this,
All right.
and then one of the greatest, most spiteful CSS properties of all, white dash space colon no wrap, all one word.
All right.
Okay, cool. So let's save that and jump back to our thing, our browser, and they should all
Lovely.
be. Yeah, they're all side by side. That's exactly what we want from those.
All right.
Now, there's a bunch of things that we can like. I'm not sure. Okay, I want to stick to the main stuff right now, because there's a lot of things that we can do, and this is where like the example code gets a little bit kind of convoluted quickly because of like all the icons and stuff that we did. So I want to make sure that we cover our bases first for this main navigation stuff.
Okay.
So let's add another one for link. We'll do data main nav dash dash link.
And is this going on each of our anchor tags?
Correct. Or on each of our yes, anchor tags.
All right. Here, I can actually use some VS Code shortcuts here. There we go. Let's. That did absolutely nothing. All right. Anyways, yes. So what styles are we going to apply to our links?
Okay, so for the link, let's just do a little bit of padding for now. I think that's probably most of it, because right now they're all jammed together, unfortunately. So we'll add a little bit of padding left and right. And we can actually, why don't we explore, there's the logical
Okay.
selectors now. So I think that this is inline, so it's padding inline.
I actually played with these.
Yeah, and so then I think you give it a start and end, so that'll be, or I guess we can just do one rem or something like that. That's probably fine.
See if that works. Nice. Golden.
Yeah. How cool is that? Yeah. So block is the other one that does top and bottom, and so you
Okay.
start there, which is really cool. So I love these logical ones because, when you're like reordering stuff, or like if you're working in like an app that supports left to right, like top, bottom, left, and right is kind of like WTF. So these follow more that like flex gap model where you have, block and inline, and you're gonna have a start and an end. And so those are all going to be relational to the direction of the content, which is super
Absolutely.
cool. Yeah, which is I freaking love it. So now what we're gonna do is we want to turn the text decoration off on this so that we can focus our or we can give additional visual priority to the current page.
Okay.
So we'll do that with text decoration, none.
All right, and that should remove our underlines. Excellent.
Yep. There we
Sorry
go.
about the swiping back and forth, y'all. Let me know if that's too much, and I can figure out a different way to do that.
Yeah, so then, so from here, we got kind of a fun one. We're going to use another data attribute selector. And this is going to target an ARIA, what is it, ARIA current page. Okay, cool. Yep, perfect. That's exactly right. So you put the attribute in there, and you put equals, and you put whatever value it is that you want to target. This could be, we could just do just the attribute, and that would look for truthiness. So any one of the values that you put in there is going to get this selection, but we really just want this to be for page when we're on the current page. Now we're going to be responsible for actually putting this attribute on there, whether that being like JavaScript, with a JavaScript router or server side. So we'll still have to control this with code, which we won't cover today. But the selector is going to be looking for that specifically page. So I'm gonna throw some styles at you. We're gonna do let's see. Let's just change let's add a border, right? So we'll do border bottom 2 pixels solid. And then the GitHub color is RGB function 249, 130, 108.
All right. Nice, healthy orange.
Yeah, and we'll do font weight bold.
Ooh, okay. Love it.
Well, cool.
You know what I'm gonna do?
Awesome.
Because I don't really fancy having to like slide back and forth every time.
Put them
One
side by
last-
side.
I'm gonna pull. Yeah, so here's what we've got so far. I'm gonna pull this off screen, and then not truly maximize this, and that way, whenever things change, I can just drag this in. That way, less sliding back and forth.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're actually looking pretty good so far. So we've been able to kind of like do the main styles, which is to just kind of like put it on a row, size the things as we want, and then also like based on the ARIA current page attribute, kind of give it the styles we want for kind of the focus selection. Let me go back to our README and see what else we want to do. Now, there's a bunch of additional things that we could do. We're running like kind of low on time, so I would leave it up to you. Let's see, we've covered most of it. We could add an SVG, or we could do the bubble might be easier because we don't have to load in the actual SVGs. So
Okay, let's shoot for the bubbles, because I think, yeah, I think the way we're handling that accessibly is going to be interesting to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's do that. I agree. That is that was kind of a fun one. The icon stuff we've covered in the past.
Yeah. For context here, we're talking about these little bubbles that say, like, for instance, 17 next to issues and stuff like that. We have talked about accessible icons before. Let me actually get the video for that. God, what did I call this? Accessible SVGs React? Is that slug? Did I get it? No, it's not.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember.
It's
We're gonna have to
this
find it.
one. Accessible SVGs React. Close enough. Almost there. So go watch that one. The site's still very much so a work in progress, but if you want to learn more about icon accessibility, that's a good one to do.
That one was super fun. We covered a lot of ground in that one as well, and it was very Reacty focused. Yeah. So here, so the next part of it. So this brings up an interesting question, like a question that I have in naming things as a designer developer, right?
Okay.
Because we saw the when we name things too visually, we kind of lock into a certain like way of thinking or an implementation. We saw this with the logical padding selectors, right? So padding
Mhm.
in line is better than like, right, left, top, and bottom, because those might get inverted based on the way the content is being presented. And so, even just now I talked about this as like a bubble, right? Because we see it
Mhm.
from the perspective of like a bubble. But if you're using assistive technologies, like what is this thing? And
Mhm.
so that's kind of this is an area where I feel like naming can be really helpful in terms of leading your team to thinking more accessible, with accessibility in
Mhm.
mind. Because if we just call this a bubble, then we only ever really think about the visual representation. Um, Now, I didn't know what to call it. Honestly, like this was a hard thing for me to
Mhm.
call it. And so I kind of like went with like a meme name, which is I've been calling these augmenters, mostly because I have this cell in my brain that anytime I don't know how to like name something that like like extends something else, I think about hooks, and how
Mm.
the one of the original names for hooks was augmenters, and how everybody hated it. But
Yes.
Sebastian, he says they'll still be augmenters in his mind for forever. So anyway, so I went with augmenters. I would love, if you can think of a better name, I would love to know, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
the people on my team who have to use this would love to know as well.
It's
Do you have any?
interesting because the thing that comes to mind for me is badge, but badge also is an overloaded term because that like also refers to like notification bubbles and stuff like that that aren't exactly the same thing. And badge is also still very much so a visual descriptor of this. Yeah, it's hard. That's hard.
It's
Um,
almost it's almost like a hint. I kind of
yeah, I don't know. I feel like hint feels a little too tool tippy for me.
sure. I played around with wormhole because it was like
What?
well, like because it kind of like it's like a lens into like the content that's like behind it, right? Like so you
Mhm.
have like you got a list of things and it's showing you that there's like 17 items in there that are like new. Like you're seeing the 17 to kind of indicate that there's it's stupid. It's stupid.
Amazing.
So
Okay, so we're gonna call these augmenters, but yeah, generally we're describing the little badges or bubbles or whatever that go on each of those tabs.
yes, exactly. So why don't we add one to maybe issues or pull requests? I think
Yeah,
probably issues, pull requests, or discussions is probably going to be the most
let's
obvious place where you would have those.
let's do issues.
Wormhole sparks joy.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.
Wormhole it is. Maybe I'll just call it WH, and then people can just wonder. Acronymizing things is great. Okay, so we're gonna back to work.
Yes.
We're gonna add a span below this, and usually anytime I add a span around one piece of content or inside of another element, I usually like to add it around all of them. I
Okay.
don't know. That's just a I don't know. Maybe that's just a nervous tick of mine. But I tend to like to do that just so that I don't accidentally try to style just the plain text from the
Mm,
parent selector. I'm always forced to kind of like add I'm always incentivized to add a selector directly to the node that I want to style directly.
for sure.
So yeah, so from there, so we have our, what is it? We have our pull requests, but then also, so let's put a number in here, like 2, I guess, and then we can add a selector. I don't know. Do you want to get playful with it and call it main nav wormhole?
Oh God, yes. You know I do.
Perfect. And then we'll add some styles for that in CSS. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe I should, let's see, I can probably copy this to you in Zoom chat. This might
Mm,
not even look good because we don't have the rest of it styled. Um, but I'll just kind of paste, or I guess you can copy and paste it from the other file if that would
yeah,
be
let me do that. Let me find that other file real quick. Just nab that, but it's you probably
yeah,
called it like augmenter in here somewhere.
augmenter. Yeah, yeah.
Here, oh, okay. Lots of stuff.
Yeah, so it's lots of stuff in there, and then it might be kind of funky because we, might need to add inline block or add block to the link or something like that.
Okay.
Uh,
Let me do that
but
real quick.
or display flex, I think maybe is what I had.
All right.
Yeah, so that should probably get us close enough. Oh, we might have to add a line height. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Oh, and I have to. There we go. Okay, line height. Which line height are we adding?
Oh, sorry, for the link.
Okay. Where is your?
And we can do line height 3. It looks like I have two. There's 2 line height values in there on accident. And 2 line height 3. Or you can just copy the whole thing.
All right, so line height 3, got it. So we've added a whole bunch of styles, but mostly what we're adding here is we've got our little wormhole here.
Yeah, that's really to make sure that the height is right, so that never mind, it didn't work anyway. That's fine though, because for our purposes, that part of it doesn't really matter a whole lot, and people have the benefit of being able to kind of see the full example, and tailor it to their needs. Okay, so that's fine. So what we want to talk about is the accessibility part of this. And this part is actually kind of fun. It's a little bit odd, but we'll kind of, work it out together.
Yeah.
Now,
can I give this a shot with VoiceOver? Yeah. Let's do that.
VoiceOver on system preferences, accessibility, Chrome, document, leaving document, document, localhost call, document, web content.
Amazing.
You are currently leaving toolbar item palette, current page, link, code, list repository for items, visited, link, issues 2. Chrome has new visited, link, pull requests. You are currently visited, link, discussions.
Okay.
You are currently on a link.
So it did say issues 2, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, right? But I think I can also, if I navigate back into here, like I can navigate to each piece of the issues, like every span inside the issues link, like individually. Let me see if I can do that.
Visited, link, issues 2. You are currently on a link in, visited, link, issues 2. 2 items, 2.
Okay, I don't, oh, there.
2. Out of, visited, current, visited, link, in, visited, link. 2 items, 2.
Maybe not. I'm not the world's most familiar person with voiceover arrows, but let me kill voiceover real quick. But yeah, so the
voiceover off.
There we go. So yeah, we did get issues 2, which is not the end of the world in terms of naming, but sounds like there's some things you want to do to spruce that up a bit better.
Yeah, and so it's not, I mean, again, like you said, this isn't the end of the world. I think issues 2 is probably fine. And so you don't have to go like all wild on this. However, there was kind of a fun little thing that we played around with, which I kind of liked, which was this little like interplay, I guess, between this element and then also an additionally visually hidden element. So we left this in play no matter what, and then we added another element afterwards, and we just used kind of like an off-the-shelf visually hidden styling.
Okay.
And we can put, I have right now data visually hidden if you wanted to copy and paste that from the kind of source code.
Let's do that. So for those who are unfamiliar with this, if you want to visually hide things from sighted users, but at the same time, if you want to visually hide things for sighted users, but leave it exposed for assistive technology users, you can't resort to things like display none or visibility hidden or any of the other tricks you would expect, because the browser uses those CSS rules as cues to hide stuff from the assistive technology too, because it's like, oh, well, clearly the intent here is that no one should be able to get this. So you have to resort to, there are various tricks, various hacks, like you'll find a lot of people use one with like clip path and clip here and overflow hidden, that basically the idea is you make the container that the text is in really, really small, and also remove any of the overflow. So that way it's not like technically invisible, it's just the window to see this thing is impossibly small. And that's kind of the workaround here. So that's what we're doing here. That's why.
Yeah, and I just pasted a link in chat to where I pulled this from. This is not something that I wrote. There are plenty of articles on the internet that talk about a visually hidden selector.
Mhm.
And so yeah, and so it goes into a little bit of depth of like why you would care about this and the technique
Mhm.
that's being used. So yeah, so for here, what we do is we just kind of write what we want to be read as. So in this case, in the source material for issues, I have we have the have the number 2 already in there, and then I just add open issues to this right here.
Okay.
And then that should theoretically, read link 2 of 3 issues to open issues.
All right, let's give it a shot. Let's put this to the test.
VoiceOver on system preferences. Access Chrome, document, Google, visited, link, issues to open issues. You are currently on a link to
Nice. Let me kill voiceover.
VoiceOver off.
Yeah. So now that I'm thinking about that, it's possible that we could even go with like some kind of like ARIA description or whatnot and take that further and get that like nice little
Yeah.
pause that ARIA description really gives you. But the thing that that we really wanted to incorporate here is the ability to, I guess, like augment these numbers with a little bit of kind of like visual communication about like, okay, like, is it 2 open issues? Is it like what types of issues is this indicating that we
Yeah.
have on this page? So yeah, so that's kind of the big win for doing that. And
Yeah.
this is the markup that kind of makes that possible to be able to style the thing, but then also kind of append some text as well.
So, if you're looking for a way to, let me actually nuke the styles here since I don't think we're going to be doing much more styling today.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a way to like augment this even further, what you could do is actually maybe how I would do this is I would have down here outside the anchor tag, I might have just straight up the text, 2 open issues. I would give this an ID of like open issues. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the hidden attribute. So this is effectively identical to using display none. It hides it visually and also removes it from assistive technologies. And then what I would do next is I would go in here, I would say, okay, I'm actually going to make this ARIA hidden. So that way assistive technology users don't get our 2 at all. So currently, the only experience that assistive technology users have is they get to our link and they hear issues. That's it.
Mhm.
That's the name of the link. It's issues. But I could come in here and I can say ARIA described by. This is I'm in my anchor tag here. I'm gonna give it the ID of my little screen reader text down here, which is 2 open issues. So you can't actually navigate to this node with the assistive technology, but it then provides a full description to assistive technology users. And in the form of a description, which basically it's treated as like optional information that you won't get in all browsing modes. But if you linger on this link for a bit, you'll be told like 2 open issues. And we'll see that right now.
VoiceOver on system preferences. Accessibility. Chrome, document, visited, link, issues. Chrome has new window. 2 open issues.
There we go.
You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control Option Space.
This has the added advantage of if I open up the rotor,
Landmarks menu, article, window, spot, links menu.
the name of our link is issues. We haven't
Issues.
introduced any clutter, right? This is the issues link, which is how sighted users would describe this link to other people. Another thing I like about this is these link names, like the name of the link. That's how you would target the link if you were using speech control, right? And so if you're using speech control, you want people to be like you want to be able to predict what the name of the link is going to be. So I, as a user, want to be able to say like, click on link issues, right? I don't
Issues.
want to have to guess that there's like this hidden text in there like that says 2 open issues. So this makes I think the link a little more predictable. There's just you have to do more kind of workarounds to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for taking us there because I was not going to, and I didn't really know how to hook it all up, but boy, did I learn.
Yeah.
VoiceOver off.
Let me put in a blog post in the chat that I wrote that kind of describes that workaround. There we go. have fun with that one, y'all.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Well, I feel like, we didn't get to all the styling, but the styling is there if you want to use it. And likely that's the thing that's going to change,
Mhm.
for a particular product, right? However, I feel like, we covered a lot of ground. And, in particular, we're really mindful of the rotor, which I think is something that is easy to forget, but
Mhm.
super important on such a critical like navigation element like this. How do you
Yes.
feel about where we got, Ben?
Oh, I feel like we did a great job. I love kind of the foray into the semantic markup that we have. And we didn't get very far in the styles. That's honest. That's fair. But yeah, I feel like we got to kind of see actually how you would actually test and validate this too, which is really nice. Means we're not really attempting accessibility into the void, right? We're actually seeing the impact that this has. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
honestly, I kind of feel all right that we didn't get to all the styles because that's going to be the thing that
Mhm.
someone's going to have to design. It's going to be different,
Yeah.
app to app. So that's really
Mhm.
fun. And I'm going to have to circle back and actually implement this cool described by, because that solves that really nice thing where you get
Yes.
the like pause, like issues, pause, and then have the name read, and then also the landmark issues. So I
Yes.
something.
I'm super excited for one thing. One little tidbit is like we have to do this kind of workaround where we have to like create a node here, and then we have to immediately like prevent anyone from ever seeing this. And then we have to do the like Aria described by. This workaround is admittedly clunky, right? Like no one wants to be like introducing extra nodes. What I'm really excited for is there is an active effort to do ARIA description. This has been in, I believe, ARIA 1.3, which is not out yet, but it's like the current draft. So hopefully soon we'll be able to use ARIA description to just be able to say like, well, the description is going to be two open
Sure.
issues. Um, Worth keeping an eye on, but also worth noting that even when this does go live, like it's still going to take some time for browsers to update and for assistive technologies to support it. So won't be immediately available, but it will mean that we won't have to do this kind of weird, clunky workaround.
Yeah, and I mean, worth noting too that this is one of the benefits that we get for
Mhm.
using a component library, right?
Yes.
And we forget sometimes that this is like the beauty of encapsulation. So we can make a really nice, clean
Mhm.
component API for this that just bakes all of this stuff in,
Yes.
and all you have to do is use the right components, and you have accessibility baked into it. And like, I think that if there's one thing value that we could instill from this is like, when you're thinking about making your components, like figure out a way that you can do it in a way that you get all the accessibility stuff for free. So you don't have to
Mhm.
do all this hooking up. Like all the hooking up is just like done for you. And then it's like, oh,
Yes.
cool. Like all this worked and it has all these really nice little, things. And we didn't have to put all of these hidden nodes by hand in there.
Mhm.
So yeah. So as you're doing your, React or Vue or, whatever the next hotness is, consider this as like a really big part of that work.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Chan, thank you so much for hopping on. This has been fantastic. Y'all, next week, Martin Bavia is coming on. We're going to be doing some Figma stuff. I've never actually used Figma, so I'm really excited to see how to build a UI out, design a UI using Figma. So this has been great. Y'all, I'm going to put her channel in the chat, but I know Stephanie was planning on streaming right after this. She may have already started. I'll try to do a raid, but y'all should absolutely go check her stream out. She's been doing some really exciting stuff this week, stuff with like 11D and stuff like that. So um, go there after I sign off, and I'm gonna try to raid her, but I don't know if she's live yet. So y'all, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.